Professors, what's something one of your students has said that made you ask, how the heck did you get into college? During the spring semester, on the 20th day of April, we had a quiz in the class I was teaching. Very normal, happened every week. On this particular day, one student wrote the following. Listen, to be honest, I'm really high right now, and I have no clue. But if I had to guess, it would be this answer. The funny thing is, he somehow managed to talk himself into the correct answer. There was also the time I got a panicked email from a student about 1 a.m. the night before a test at 11 a.m. the next day. The email said, "Oh no, I somehow slept through the test. I'm so sorry. Is there any way I can make it up?" About 5 minutes later, I got a second email from the same student. So ignore that last email. I sleep with a closet without windows, and thought it was 1 p.m., not 1 a.m. Oops. Next story. I think part of the glory of being a TA is maintaining your humility in times like these. I probably would have given the student from the second example, closet with no windows, extra points because I knew the feeling. The high kids were frustrating. It's not like I never went stoned to class. I did, but not to the class I was teaching. I would get kinda mad when students would come to the lab stoned and proceed to make a bunch of mistakes. It was like, we aren't working with super hazardous chemicals for the most part, but they need to be treated as such. Get high before Asian American literature, I don't care. Be able to read a effing chemical label before you come to a chemistry lab, though. Then I remember them going to OChem labs effing high as crap all the time, and give them a break. Next story. I worked in IT for the dorms and had a few stand out. Most were people who couldn't follow an install process that was literally a click next a few times process. I'd get called saying they were stuck and didn't know what to do. I'd have them read the screen. To continue, click next. Okay, do you want to continue? Yeah, click next then. Oh. But the worst was a guy who was furious our software broke his brand new laptop. It wouldn't even turn on anymore. Brought it in, furious and yelling. We asked for the power cord and he was lost on those words. It's wireless, he says. The ship charge ran out. Next story. Not a teacher, but one of my professors was telling a story of how he placed a tarp over an oil barrel to keep the wind off it and thus keep it warm. A classmate of mine raises his hand and asks, "Does wind really cool inanimate objects down like it does to us?" The professor instantly replied, "Ever blow on your soup there, big boy?" Hey, at least you have to respect the effort here to be engaged in the conversation and try to learn. Not everyone knows things that most other people know, and now he's educated, so I don't have any problem with asking that question. No need to shame the guy. Next story. I'm not a professor, but a fellow student once asked the professor in my Spanish class, "Do the Mexicans in Iraq have the same dialect as the ones here?" The professor was like, "Iraq isn't a Spanish-speaking country, but I would assume that any Mexicans that have moved there probably do speak with the same dialect." Then she goes, "But aren't they all Mexican?" She thought Mexicans and Middle Eastern people were the same thing. I could feel the entire class collectively cringe. Next story. I knew a girl who was getting her master's degree in botany. Some of my favorite dumbest things she said were, 1. She claimed to be a Scientologist. When my friend asked her what Scientology was like and how she got involved in it, she replied, "I don't believe in religion. I believe in evolution and science and stuff." 2. I had a small party in my cramped apartment. A lot of my friends smoke, and there was a cloud of cigarette smoke in the place for the whole time this girl was there. She was sitting in it without any problems. Then a friend of mine brought out chewing tobacco, and she freaked out, claiming she was allergic to tobacco. When we pointed out that she had been in a cloud of cigarette smoke all night, she said, "I'm allergic to tobacco, not smoke." 3. Her favorite band was Nickelback. Yeah, I know this is a meme that I thought was over with, but apparently is still a thing. Nickelback's not that bad, guys. Maybe not the best band of all time, but definitely does not warrant all the hate and memeage that it gets. Next story. I received a paper in a film class that was so incoherent, I actually had to start looking into how the student who wrote it had in fact been accepted to the college. I still have a copy of it too. Here's a sample passage. "The many slopes that a talking mountain lion needs a cure for his disease has been a preview of man to plant." Bonus points to anyone who can figure out which movie he's describing. Next story. I work in the museum industry, and part of my job is leading programs for homeschooled students. In my state, you must have a college degree to homeschool your kids. That means these parents not only got into college, but graduated. Here are some of the questions I've been asked by the parents. If Betelgeuse is so big, why is it a star and not a planet? I had to explain the difference between stars and planets. Specifically, that stars look so small in our sky because of how effing far away they are. Why are there foreigners on the International Space Station? And my favorite, when will Hubble find God? Next story. Professor of English here. I taught Alice Walker's Everyday Use, a short story about an African-American family in the late 60s/early 70s, which mentioned things like automobiles, TV, and Polaroid cameras to my freshman class. In a paper about it, one white American student wrote, "This story was written shortly after the Civil War, when black people didn't know how to act in society." I called the student into my office. Our conversation. Me. "Do you know when the Civil War took place?" Her. "I don't really know much history." Me. "It was over 100 years before this story took place." I was seriously thinking, how the heck did you get into college right then? Next story. TA for freshman level course here. Over the course of reading hundreds of papers by these students every semester, I found it wasn't what they said, but how they said it, 90% of the time. Like entire papers without punctuation, spelling and grammar mistakes throughout a paper that even words should be able to correct. Canned phrases like, "in today's day and age," just everywhere, etc. Of course, there's this one student who wrote about the atrocities of the Holocaust for a literature assignment. We were studying a book written and set in the time of World War I. Judging from the paper, this guy had no idea the First World War was even a thing. Next story. I teach as an adjunct at a few public schools of varying quality, and it's less funny and more sad. In a senior level research writing class, I teach a student asked, "Do you want the paragraphs to be centered on the page or up against the left side?" That was funny, but the fact was that up until this point in her education, every teacher she had just passed through their classes without even bothering to tell her how to align her goddamn text, and I was the first person to give her a legit answer to this. I see this kind of crap all the time. Students who don't use periods, students who submit 5-page essays as one long paragraph between an intro and a conclusion. They'd never had a teacher who cared enough to tell them that this wasn't what you were supposed to do, and now they're about to graduate and they're hearing this from me for the first time. There's just so many deadbeat teachers out there who pass students through their classes because they don't want to deal with teaching them anything, and it's unbelievably sad. Edit. By schools, I meant colleges and teachers. I meant both professors and high school teachers. Not to knock down the fourth wall here, but as someone who makes a part-time income on reading people's posts on Reddit, I would certainly appreciate well-punctuated and well-formatted posts so that I can read them a little bit easier. Thank you. Next story. Not a professor, but I had a roommate in college. Didn't know who the current president was. Couldn't name a single past president except Washington and that cute one, which was apparently Kennedy. Thought Alaska was an island, because when you look at the map of the US, it's on its own separate box out in the ocean next to Hawaii. Was very proud about knowing how many calories were in a teaspoon of semen, and would enthusiastically share this knowledge with anyone around her. This girl had graduated with honors from her high school. Next story. I've had multiple graduate students not turn in assignments on time, and their excuse was, "You didn't remind us." Well, all due dates are on the syllabus, which we review in detail the first day of class, and I'm not your mother, and you're a effing adult. Next story. I had a friend-ish in college who always bragged about taking all AP classes in high school. She was very snooty about her study habits and clearly looked down on me for writing papers at the last minute and not living in the library. She was incensed when she realized that I got A's on my 2-hour rushed papers, and she got C's after spending weeks on her papers and even meeting with the professors to conference about them. She asked me to edit one of her papers once. I didn't even know what to say after I read it. I couldn't even red pen it because the paper would have been solid red. This formal essay was full of run-on sentences that changed topics mid-sentence and strange conversational tangents about her personal experiences. Honestly, I would have expected more from a 6th grader. I was baffled by this, but soon realized she came from a pretty crappy high school. Basically, anyone who could sit still in class and complete assignments was put in AP classes. I came from one of the nation's highest-ranked high schools, where AP classes were reserved for Ivy League contenders, and the regular classes were sometimes more grueling than college classes. College is interesting because of things like differences in high schools. A lot of freshmen enter college having been the smartest kid in their class. Suddenly, finding themselves in a room full of the smartest kid, they lose their identity. It's pretty cringy watching it all go down. High schools like the one my friend attended set kids up for failure by rewarding anyone willing to participate. She had all the confidence and none of the skills. High schools like mine over-prepare kids, which is great, but they also leave very bright kids believing they're barely average. After this long ramble, I really have no point. I guess I'm just curious to see if anyone else made similar observations in college. Next story. My boyfriend used to be in academia. He mostly taught graduate classes when he taught, so pretty much everyone he encountered had already survived undergrad, which you would think means less idiots. But every semester, he'd female dog about at least one Chinese student. I'm not trying to be discriminatory, but many of these students who came directly from China could not speak English even conversationally, let alone with working proficiency. He had a PhD student for a while who had other Chinese students in his lab translate for him. He couldn't participate in meetings. I'm sure this student, and I know many others, cheated on the TOEFL. Cheating on the international student population has actually become a problem at this university. I went there and worked my butt off for my degree, and this makes me sad. Next story. A student was telling us all about his plans after college. He wanted to open his own brewery. Awesome, amazing, absolutely perfect geographic region for it and everything. This was several years ago too, so the timing was perfect for home brews. So I asked him why he was majoring in English when the school had an amazing and incredibly well-connected business program. He was in his last year. He cried a little. Next story. Not a professor, but there was a student in my class who was dumb as nails and always had something to say. We'll call him Ed. Notable moments. Couldn't understand the concept of in general. I forget the exact topic, but the professor made a comment about the general opinion of something. Ed points out that not everyone may share his opinion. The teacher acknowledges this, but says that we're just talking about the general opinion at the moment. Ed can't let it go. We spend a solid 15 minutes trying to explain to him that outlying opinions weren't relevant to the point. It ended up with him asking, "What are you saying? Their opinions don't matter?" We answer, "Yes," and he sat there dumbfounded for a while as if we had said other opinions never matter. We were discussing the creation of Adam painting by Michelangelo. Many people in the class were talking about how beautiful and emotional the piece is. Ed chimes in, saying he doesn't get it. It's an okay painting, but he doesn't feel that emotional about it. I make a comment about how art speaks to people differently, and this one just might not reach him the same way it does for others. Then Ed says he has no idea what's going on in the painting. Someone explains it to him, and then he's like, "Oh, that is amazing." Our class was a mythology class, so we read different stories every week. At the beginning of the semester, our teacher read us a quote from the author of our textbook. Basically, he said, "Those who choose to learn about mythology because they think it will make them sound smart will get very little out of it. You have to enjoy mythology to truly learn from it." Fast forward to near the end of the semester. After reading one story, we were told that we had a test coming up on some of the theories we read recently. Ed raises his hand and says he didn't enjoy this one, so it's unfair for him to be tested. He explains that because he didn't enjoy it, he couldn't possibly learn anything from it, so it's unfair. He's dead effing serious. We spent several minutes explaining that the quote referred to gaining personal insight and had nothing to do with being able to take a test. He still didn't get it. Next story. Not a professor, but I'm a manager in a college bookstore. Yes, I know the industry is terrible. No, I do not set the prices. Pearson is your enemy, not me. I had a student come in 3 weeks into classes and ask me to show him where he could find the book for his English class. Fine, I bring him to the shelf where there are 3 books listed for his class. I point them out to him. He looks at me and says, "Okay, which one do I need?" I check the tag and see that they are all required, so I say, "Oh, you need all of them." Mind you, these were 3 less than $10 books. He looks at me like I've grown an extra head and asks, "But which one do I need?" I say, "All 3. That's what your professor has requested. Why do I need 3 books? Because that's what your professor has assigned. You're going to be reading all 3 books this semester. He stared at me blankly. Okay, how about this? Do you know what book you're reading in class right now? No. Okay, do you have a syllabus with you? No. Okay, then all I can tell you is that these are the 3 books required by your professor for the course. Do you want them? No. Thanks for your help. He walked away and I didn't see him in the bookstore again. I couldn't believe someone who had 3 weeks of class already didn't know what he was studying at the moment, or that he didn't know that you sometimes need more than 1 book for a class at the college level. Next story. I'm an actual professor. Does that count? I received an email a few days ago from an anatomy student who wanted to know if the video they saw of a woman being fisted in seemingly evidence of the guy's moving hand in the abdomen was possible. I haven't answered yet. And you probably don't want to answer that, lest you open up the can of worms and send them down the rabbit hole. Next story. Not a professor, but this girl. Not the stupidest person I've met, in my opinion, but definitely the most frustrating. We were talking about child soldiers, and she asked why they, quote, can't just get a real job. She also claimed nobody follows the law anywhere, so laws do nothing. In the middle of a group presentation about poaching, she said, "This is really more of a discussion than a presentation, so I'm going to add something," and then talked for 10 minutes about the philosophy course she was also taking. Basically, anytime the professor would make a point, she'd counter it. Sometimes she ended up arguing the exact same thing as him. Sometimes it was clear she had no idea what she was talking about. We started wondering if she just really liked playing devil's advocate. She wasn't just dumb, but also really stubborn about playing dumb, which is the worst kind of dumb. Next story. I'm not a prof, and neither is my wife. When she took freshman English, an assignment, what to create a hypothesis for an issue and to write about it. Some kid turned in his work, and the professor said, "You did not put your hypothesis on your paper." The kid replied, "I could not find the hypothesis key on my keyboard." My wife said the professor had to look like she was dealing with a complete idiot. She composed herself and said, "I would look harder on the keyboard. It is there." Next story. I was a professor/faculty librarian for a large state university. Each of the librarians would do a certain amount of hours per week on the reference desk, helping students with whatever questions they had about research or finding resources. One day, a kid comes up to me. He says he needs help researching a topic for a paper he has due. "What's your topic?" I ask him. "I need to write a manifesto on obesity." "Are you sure? A manifesto?" I ask. "Yeah, I need to write a manifesto about obesity," he says. So, after a few more minutes of questions, and still totally confused on why this kid would need to write a manifesto, I finally ask if he has some printed directions about the project from his professor. He hands them to me. He needs to write about the manifestations of obesity, the causes, you know? I stifled my laughter and explained the difference, but that was one that really blew me away. Next story. I don't remember the whole discussion, but my friends were having a talk about politics or something, and we were debating about whether or not the writ of habeas corpus would apply in some scenario. So we asked a friend who's just started in the graduate program for his law degree, expecting him to know about such a thing. "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't speak Spanish," he says. Next story. Chemistry professor here. Anyone who tells me they want to be a doctor, but they hate science. Anyone who wants to be a scientist but doesn't believe in scientific theories and laws. Anyone who tells me they want to be a chemist but continually fails developmental studies level math courses. And then there was the time I referred to North Korea as a black box and a student thought I was saying there's a literal black box on NK. She's a dentist now. I get a lot of students who are very poorly read, and you can tell because they don't understand more than a few syllables at a time. Next story. Was a TA and tutor, helping a management major/hockey player with his accounting homework. Dude was provided with an Excel sheet as part of the assignment with a column of numbers and a sum at the bottom. He refused to move on until he double-checked Excel's sum feature using his calculator because the person who made the sheet might not have been good at math. He was a good hockey player, though. Next story. Not a professor, but was a TA for the metal shop of the mechanical engineering program and taught machining for 9 hours a week for 3 hours. The introductory project for the sophomores in the machine shop is a little spring-powered metal car. Mill the base, drill and tap some screw holes, turn the wheels on the lathe. Every year, without fail, I would need to tell 3 mechanical engineering college sophomores how to use a screwdriver. Next story. Not a professor, but in my first semester of community college, I took English Comp 1. One day, we had an in-class activity where everyone wrote one sentence on their own sheet of paper, and then sent their paper to the next person who would write another sentence to continue the story, until everyone had their original paper passed back to them. The huge amount of grammar and spelling mistakes I witnessed that day made me wonder how some of my fellow students made it out of middle school, let alone how they graduated high school and passed the CPT to even get into Comp 1. Next story. I'm a student, but answer to the question is still relevant. I go to a large Midwest public university in the United States with a very good engineering program. This is my first semester here, so I've been exposed to a lot of the random "how are you here" students, but I thought my first encounter would be interesting to share. Thursday, I'm sitting in my 4th week of macroeconomics discussion class, which is a graduation requirement for practically every major, leading to a large mix of people. Before class begins, when this woman sits down next to me and starts trying to talk to me. No one ever speaks in the class besides the TA, so I was pretty surprised. She pulls out a notebook and asks me if this is the right one for the class. In large letters on the front, it reads, CCLV 115, Mythology of Greece and Rome. That's strange. Maybe she's just in the wrong classroom. I ask her if she's supposed to be in the mythology class, and she says, no, I'm supposed to be in Econ 103, macroeconomics. Oh, well, maybe she pulled out the wrong book? Nope. Continues to ask me if this is the book for this class, where I have to explain to her what this class actually is and what the textbook should look like. I asked some follow-up questions and found out the rest of the story. She registers for macroeconomics and accidentally goes to the wrong lecture on the first day. She proceeds to go to the Mythology of Greece and Rome lecture and discussion for 4 entire weeks before realizing that something is up. She buys an extra $80 textbook for a class she was not registered for before realizing that macroeconomics and Mythology of Greece and Rome slightly different topics. I proceed to tell her the difference between the two topics and tell her that she's been going to the wrong class. Now needs to buy another $100 online textbook, access for macroeconomics, and make up the homework from the first 4 weeks. Felt bad for a few seconds until I realized how dumb that was. Midterm was the following week. Yeah, I'm sorry, young lady, you are screwed. Best to just drop it and try again the next semester. Next story. I briefly taught at a place that was tolerable as an undergrad institution, but as a graduate school, a lot of its programs were just diploma mills. The first time I taught a graduate level class, I had a student with a 4.0 and who was one course away from earning his MS. Exam 1 had 8 essay questions and most students filled a blue book. This guy fills half a blue book, and there's not one single true sentence in any of his answers. Each attempted sentence was either a fragment or a run-on. Now, I was not grading English. My grading rubric focused on the content of the answers, not the grammar. But when I discovered that my peers were giving as to functionally illiterate individuals, I was pretty depressed. I would also like to learn where this guy earned his bachelor's degree. They should shut that place down as well. Beyond the fact that he couldn't write a single sentence, the guy's content on exam 1 was also rubbish, so he got a 4% on it. He dropped the course, and I don't know if he ever earned a degree from that institution or not. Next story. I wasn't the professor, but a kid in a composition class literally said that Helen Keller was an idiot. It was the first time in his life that he had learned that she was a socialist. He probably also wasn't aware that socialism was a competing ideology in the United States up until the 1950s. Next story. Me. We get Easter off. Student. That's weird that a Jewish university would give Easter week off. Me. This is a Catholic university. Didn't you notice all the Virgin Mary statues? Student goes, wasn't she Jewish? She was a sophomore. Next story. Used to be a TA for my professor, and he just gave me a midterm paper of this guy in his senior year. The class was for this communication course. Topic: media portrayals of urban culture. Guy turned in a very touching paper about how living in the South and how he felt discriminated as an Asian immigrated. Discriminated by his peers in the media. Turns out that the essay was from a white guy. Copied the paper from someone who turned in the same assignment 2 years ago. Didn't proofread it. To make that guy nervous, I didn't grade it, but just wrote "see me" and told my professor about how touching this Asian guy's story is. Must have been the most awkward office hours visit for him and my professor. Then we found out that all his papers were from the same previous student that took the class 2 years ago. The white git was doing the same thing everywhere. Of course, I only wonder how he got accepted into a UC at all. Next story. Obligatory, not a professor, but I go to an Ivy League school and everyone is forced to take a mandatory writing class during their freshman year. During peer review, I'm seriously wondering how these people were even able to submit their college applications. I'm talking about not bothering to use BibMe to write their bibliography, just copy and pasting the Wikipedia URL in it, or just very basic formatting issues that the professor would use a full class period explaining with directions on how to correct, Times New Roman, double-spaced, 1-inch margins, etc., or turning in 2.5 pages when the page minimum is 7 with no paragraph or clear coherence. Next story. Honestly, as a professor, my most dumbfounded moments always involved lack of basic math skills. How did you get to college as a chemistry major without being able to do simple division or even multiplication? Without being able to distribute something outside of parentheses to inside parentheses? All of these things happen, by the way. The other is always related to computer skills. Some of my students didn't know you could use Excel to do math. Some of my students had never used Excel. Others were blinded by their Mac upbringing. They used Pages, Apple's version of Word, and had no idea what Word was. Some of them had no idea how to restart a computer. A few that are more forgivable, but still less so in my field, is the lack of ability to do differentiation and integration. By the time I had gotten to college, I had already had a year of calculus, maybe 2, I don't remember. Sometimes I'd get students in my honors chemistry class who had no experience whatsoever with calculus. Really? I know it's not technically a prerequisite for this class, but we sure as hell use it. Oh, and of course you get the kids with absolutely no knowledge on the subject matter. Many kids wrote water as O2H instead of H2O, and had no idea why it was marked wrong. I taught honors chemistry too. They've already had a year of chemistry in college. How? I have no idea. I think this can best be explained as lazy teachers before you just passing them because they didn't want to put up with the extra work. So yeah, bad teachers beget bad students, and then the higher up they climb, it becomes a better teacher's problem. Next story. Not a professor, but I overheard it this week. 2 teachers spent 10 plus minutes trying to tell a student that the 2-hour time limit on a test will still count even when he left the website. It went like this. Teachers, the timer will still count down even when you close out. Student, oh, so I can stop and come back later? The timer will still count down when you close out. Oh, so I can stop and come back later? Teacher says the same thing as last time, but slightly different. The student goes, oh, so I can stop and come back later? This went on for a while. Next story. My dad is an economics/business professor. He had a student turn in their end of semester essay on lined paper, handwritten, in pencil. I was home visiting for the holidays, and he hollered for me to come into his office. He was like, can you believe this crap? I'm not grading this crap. I couldn't believe that crap either. I haven't turned in a handwritten paper since middle school, let alone a college course. Next story. Not a professor, but my roommate wrote a paper explaining that the reason for camels being an overused, stereotypical symbol of the Middle East is because oil got expensive and people couldn't drive, so they rode camels. 1-humped camels were like coupes for single riders, and 2-humped camels were like minivans for families. 10 years later, and I send her a picture every time I see a camel, and I ask for its specs.